Literally, I had 10 years of my life without getting hay fever. And now we're every summer getting bodied.
Oh, you acquired it?
Yeah, I used to get it in when I was a kid. Hay fever, I'm talking about. I talked about this on my stream, but people didn't seem to know what it was. It's basically when the pollen, I don't know, like the pollen spores start affecting your eyes. I don't even know. This is a weird place to start. But yeah, it just causes insane irritation to your eyes and they get really red and bloodshot and itchy and it's not very nice at all. So,
question.
Another reason why I don't really enjoy summer.
Question.
Hit me with it.
Why did no one in your live stream know what hay fever was?
Mate, I don't know. Maybe it's maybe it's the thing that's just like not in other countries. Maybe they just don't get it. I don't know. Or maybe it's got a different name. That would be my guess. I don't know. Because it's a bit of a weird name. Who knows?
You know what?
I don't know.
You know why I know that isn't true? Because in the US, they have hay fever. Because I've seen some of the advertisements in between rounds in the UFC. And then it always has that comical aspect to it. You must have seen this. When an American ad comes on for health, and then the first part of your subconscious realizes that you've never seen a drug commercial for health because you're not allowed to do that legally in the UK, right?
Yeah,
and then
that's true.
Also, on top of that, it then lists for the next 10 minutes all the potential side effects that this can give you. And I know that they are covering a lot of bases so that they don't have to get hit with a crazy lawsuit. I understand that. But it's also insane to hear the possible side effects to such minimal usage drugs. For example, if you just have a headache or a sore throat. Regardless, talking of a sore throat, I had 1 or 2 in Saudi Arabia because the heat out there is dry, it is intense, and it is a very interesting place to start with this fight card. UFC Saudi Arabia, first ever time.
Very good.
Just overall, what did you think of it? Just in general.
If I had to use a word to describe it, I think I'd just say flat. Do you know what I mean? It was just subdued. I think probably the arena combined with the crowd not being, I guess, used to the fight game of the norm, I suppose, if that's the right phrase to use. But it just felt flat, subdued. The whole atmosphere, the whole night, it just felt a bit off, I guess. Strange. Like even when there was a few finishes, which we're finally getting, you know, obviously with the new gloves, there's been a lack of knockouts recently, but it seems that's finally starting to change. But even with those finishes, crowd pop wasn't anything crazy. So I don't know. I personally wasn't a huge fan, but I appreciate what they're trying to do, to be honest with you. I think the sport being represented in different countries is only a positive. I always say that. So
yeah, they were talking about getting 30,000 people over there next time in the first quarter of 2025. That's what Turkey Al-Sheikh said to Dana White and to ESPN after the event. They said next time it comes to Saudi Arabia, it'll be in the first quarter of 2025. So it's not that far away, really. And on top of that, they want 30,000 fans. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. Because what I made a video on earlier, and what I think is a point to that, it's not necessarily the atmosphere, but when you look at the amount of people, bless you, because it was busy, We've seen events in the Middle East that have a lot of empty seats, but when it started to get later on in the crowd, it was very busy. There were a lot of people there. So what I think that points to is not necessarily who was on the card. Yes, there were some big names, but not lots, I don't think. It shows that the UFC doesn't need names or big fights on a card to sell out an event in a particular region. They can go anywhere around the world to any place and sell out events without even telling the fans who is headlining the event yet. And I think that just sort of speaks to where the sport is firstly, but what the UFC have done with their brand. Because you couldn't say the same for the other major organizations, right? Or most of the organizations. So, yeah, it was an interesting one. I get what you mean about flat. I actually knew where you were going to go with that. I sort of get what you mean. There wasn't a crazy buzz.
General
it started-
consensus, right?
Yeah, it started off a little bit slow. I thought there were some good fights. It was one of those that if you competed on the card, you were probably involved in a very good scrap. You probably fought very well, but just overall, it just felt a little bit.
Do you know who got the bonuses? I didn't actually see that.
It's a good question, actually. Neither. I listened to
I
the
didn't-
post-fight press
yeah.
conference, but I actually wasn't sure if they even mentioned that. But what I do know is the man that stepped up to fight Shara Bullet, I believe they paid
Yes, I
quite
saw that.
handsomely. Because he got his show and his win from the Ikram Aliskerov fight that he was meant to be in. And then he also got his money for tonight. So he got paid nicely.
He eaten. Well,
Contextually.
he's eaten by the UFC standards. I don't know about in terms of how much he deserves to be paid, but again, that's another can of worms which we won't open today because we've done it too many times before. What did you think of the main event, Robert Whittaker? You want to open it? You want to open it?
No, not necessarily, but no, I won't open it. Robert Whittaker.
Let's leave those worms.
Robert Whittaker.
Yeah, Robert Whittaker.
Every now and again, you just like to... Nothing against Ikram Aliskerov, but you do like to see every once in a while the MMA world just be corrected. Because what happens
Pieces falling into
sometimes
place.
is you get people that are so talented and that do such incredible things. And it's what I said to you before, right? I said, Aliskerov has looked good against everyone he's faced, and that's all that you can do. The only question I have, which is the only one I need answered, is what does that look like against the upper echelon? And when I say it's corrected, it's because we are just shown the levels to this game and what the difference looks like between getting finishes and getting wins in the middleweight division and getting wins at the top of the middleweight division, because there's been a couple of sharks for a few years that have just swum around those waters and just protected anything gold. And it has looked like Robert Whittaker and Israel for the past however many years. And we just saw that again. And it was nice to be reminded of just how good he is. And the craziest thing, which you'll know, he's just coming into his athletic prime on paper. So I was impressed.
Crazy. Yeah, and you know, you say how impressive he is, and still now, you think how long he's been just active and competing at this level. It's actually crazy. It feels like he's fighting. Like, every year, you're like, oh, surely he's going to lose now. And I know, obviously, he lost to Drickers, and that was quite a big shock. But the amount of different fighters, that I think something you have to really give him some credit for is very few, if any, rematches. I mean, outside of the Adesanya championship second fight, all new competition, and every time he steps up, pretty much. And you can't say that about a lot of people. It almost reminds me of Dustin Poirier, obviously, minus the fact that he has become an undisputed champion. The level of the resume, just the amount of different prospects, you know, and elite top 5 fighters he's just beating week in, week out, it feels like. I thought it was astonishing. Very, very impressive performance. And just quickly, I'll give it back to you in a minute, just to finish off. I originally was picking Ikram on my stream. I was like, I feel like the power is going to be too much. And we saw Costa. We saw what happened in that fight. Whittaker on skates a little bit. But then as we were leading up to the fight, I was like, I completely switched up. I was like, no, I think Whittaker's going to show him levels. I think this is going to be domination. Completely changed my tune. And I'm glad I did, because it was a beautiful knockout. I had him doing the little chicken dance. And at that point, I think you all know it's just over at that point. You see that chicken dance, he smells blood, and it's done. And I've also, just another thing, I've become a huge fan, even more so than I already was, of Whittaker because of how much I love his podcast. I've shouted out on him many times before, but the MMA Arcade podcast, it's quite hard to say. But it combines my two favorite things, which is games and MMA. So, and he's great on it. It's a great time. So shout out to those guys who work on that, including Rob himself. But yeah, great performance. And back to you, of course. What were you saying?
It was only because you triggered a thought I hadn't even had. That's why I was trying to not forget, because as you said that, you're bang on. Because when you think of Robert Whittaker, he goes into the bracket of the likes of Dustin Poirier, RDA, Robert Whittaker. these guys that when you look at their resumes have fought absolutely everyone. And you think of Bobby Knuckles, you think of Brad Tavares, Derek Brunson, Israel Adesanya. You've got the likes of Yoel Romero. Just absolutely everyone and anyone of any generation in the middleweight division. He's been there. And that's not even talking about the people he faced, obviously, in his welterweight time in the UFC. So we've seen this man have about 5 different careers, and it seems like this is his 6th. And it seems like that whether it be the Israel trilogy, full Volk and Holloway vibes, or if it's the rematch with Dricus du Plessis, it's hard to pick against him. It's maybe you would side with the other person, but at the moment, just not only physically what he's doing, but mentally the place that he seems like he's in, he just seems very problematic for anyone. And I know the fights didn't go his way with both Israel and Dricus, but out of those two, including Sean Strickland, I wouldn't pick anyone as a sizable favourite. Anyone against Bobby Knuckles right now. He is a problem.
You can't.
And he is the worst matchup for everyone in the division. He said that, and I do believe that to be true. Am I being recently biased?
No,
I don't
no,
think
I completely agree. I think the question is, who do you throw him next? I was debating this on my Discord server, and a few people, I completely disagreed with this, by the way, but a few people were saying Sean deserves the shot first of the winner of Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis, which we'll get into in a minute. But I was adamant. I was like, come on. I mean, you've got a guy on a 2-fight winning streak versus a 1-fight winning streak, both former champs. Yes, Sean was more recently so. But if you look at the manner of the wins, you've got a knockout over one of the most feared prospects in the division, / even the roster, in my opinion, in Aliskerov, and obviously a win over Costa, which may not have been as dominant as Strickland's, but I don't think Strickland's win over Costa was even that impressive. He didn't even have him in trouble over 25 minutes once. And I'm sorry, maybe that might be playing devil's advocate a little bit, but I don't want to see Strickland anywhere near a title fight, not just because of the fact he's boring. I think Rob deserves it more, personally. And I don't think he deserves to be in a title eliminator either. I think you have to give him the shot. There, I said it.
Right.
I'm saying
I'm gonna have to call you down with a little bit more nuance than that. We're gonna have to use some, because it was a lovely speech that you delivered for sure.
Okay.
But we have to apply some.
We're doing this.
Come on, we have to apply some.
Okay.
Because if you just look at it, okay, if I were to say that, put it online, what would every Sean Strickland fan in the world say? They'd have a couple of points, and a couple of them wouldn't be unfair to have. They would say to you, okay, yeah, Rob did just get a nice finish. But who was that against? It was against a fairly unknown, unranked guy. So yes, there was an incredible amount of risk, but the level of, you know, these conversations, how these go, the level of competition wasn't as high. That's correct. Like, you can't debate that. That is correct, even though there was a lot of risk. So you look at Sean, and he's just coming off of what a lot of people believed was a win. Razor close fight, but a lot of people had him winning the fight, including the boss, which is as important as anything, to be perfectly honest, how he views something. So that's 2 things. And then off the back of that, you have the most dominant performance over Israel we've ever seen. Full stop. So that's the most dominant champion. And that was the most dominant performance. And then a razor close, like to the point people asking for a rematch then. Okay. Whilst I'm still saying no, don't do the rematch then. He then goes out and just dominates Paulo Costa. Whatever you want to say about that fight, he just dominates it. Yeah, it wasn't the most exciting, but he made it not look exciting. Managed to suffocate Paulo for 25 minutes and limited him to absolutely nothing. So however you want to look at that, it was dominant against someone that usually can offer a lot offensively. So then you look at that and you think, okay, that's an incredible amount of momentum. It was razor close against Dricus and an incredible win. So I would actually probably say, Sean, it is fair to maybe throw him straight in the mix. But personally, I want to see them fight each other. I want to see them fight
Yeah,
each
I'm
other.
happy for it. I'd
I
rather
wanna
Rob
see
didn't
Paulo
because I
Costa.
don't want him to lose. But
I want to see Paulo Costa fight Chimaev, and I want to fight Sean Strickland versus Bobby Knuckles. They can fight for the title next, and then the winner of Chimaev and Costa can go and fight probably the loser of one of those two situations. And that is what I would like to see.
I'm happy with that. Okay, you know, I'll compromise on that. I think Paulo Costa against Shemaev is a bit harsh, though. I think that's a bit unfair
Why?
for him.
To who?
I mean, getting thrown in against Shemaev, of course. I mean,
In. I think that's a great
matchup-wise,
matchup
if you want to
for
give
him.
him some momentum, you think so?
Yeah, I think it's a great matchup for him. I think it's the perfect matchup for him.
You don't think he could just get taken down and wrestled? I know he's got
Has
good
he
wrestling.
ever been taken down and wrestled?
Well,
Has he
no,
been
but
in there
Shemaev
with
did it to
Yoel
Usman.
Romero?
I know I don't want to use MMA math, but Shemaev could do it. Shemaev's one of the best wrestlers in the game. I don't think that's
And Yoel
a matter
Romero
of opinion.
isn't at 185 pounds?
Yeah, okay. But equally as well, you've got to talk about the cardio.
Exactly.
I mean,
Who
neither
have we
guy's
seen
great
go
cardio,
5
I
rounds?
suppose.
Who have we seen go 5 rounds? Who have we not seen go 5 rounds? That's my question to you. Who have we seen go a hard 15 and a hard 25? And who have we seen flag towards the 15s and hasn't gone 25?
I'd say both of them have done that, to be honest. I don't think either of them have very good
You've
cardio.
seen Chimaev go 5 rounds? You haven't seen that.
No, true. But Costa never looks good when he does as well. So
yeah, but he can still push the pace. I think that he definitely doesn't get as effective, but he can still push a higher pace. I've seen that from Costa many times. Okay. Back and forth wars against the very best. Against very durable people as well. The Yoel Romeros, the Marvin Vettori, very durable people. Bobby Knuckles just went a hard 15.
I'm with you.
I think there's a reason that Paulo Costa, let me just end it on this. There is a reason that Paulo Costa has been extremely vocal in wanting that fight. Because stylistically, that's not an easy matchup. But if you're looking at that top 5, top 10...
If I asked you that?
I think he could win. I think there's a lot of difficult fights for him. But I think if he's going to look at any of those difficult fights, I think he says, you know what? I want the guy over 5 rounds that's never gone 5 rounds, especially not in my weight class. Let's be honest. He's recently been quite ill. You know, it don't hurt.
No better time.
You know what he actually said? He came out when he called for him. You know what? Sometimes he tries quite hard, and I like Paulo Costa, but I don't always find myself really laughing at it. But he was on Ariel's show, I think it was, and he said he was asking for Chimaev, and he was actually being very, very sincere and just saying, I think it's a really good fight to bring back the old Paulo. I think it'll be the perfect style matchup. I don't even want him just because I think he's dying. I really think it's a good matchup. He just dropped it in so casually, and he genuinely said it with sincerity as well. That was the funniest thing, and it did make me laugh. But obviously,
yeah, I do like him.
Let me just touch on that quickly, because that's the thing with Chimaev, right? One of the most exciting fighters on the roster, undoubtedly does bring a level of attention, a level of magnetism with him wherever he goes. I've seen it in person. I've felt it in person. It's crazy. It really is insane. And that was even in the Middle East. So it was even compounded. And this guy he brings a level of stardom to the game. When he was sitting on top of the cage with Darren Till, that was one of the sickest intros into a fight ever. The whole stadium just goes green in the middle of the desert, and he's just sitting on the cage with his arms crossed. And this is his huge cut. These are massive fights for him. So he's a star. But it always seems like his illness comes towards where the back end of the camp is. And that's when the hardest training is about 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, when you're really starting to peak just before you slightly taper off and then come into fight week. And it makes me think he's always known as training like a beast. He's always known as the hardest worker. Is he maybe working too hard in the training room? That's the one concern that I have.
Maybe.
Because he is a beast. And he's had 5 main events, and he's had to pull out 5 of them through illness, which is insane. So they've all come around this particular time. Now I'm just speculating here, hypothesizing, but it sounds logical to me because it's all come around the same time and it coincides with being an incredibly hard-working person, because that's the incredibly difficult thing about MMA. It's balancing working hard with working smart. And it's such a difficult blend to get, and everyone's different. So everyone has to find their limit, and everyone is completely individual. And I just wonder if he's not finding that blend right now.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I mean, I saw Alexander Gustafsson say something about it, whether it was, I wish I could remember the words he was talking about, but he said it was, I think he said something to do with it being unrelated to his training or something like that. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I mean, hopefully we see him back in the cage soon, but it just feels like there's no guarantees with that man. It feels like it's happening all the time, and I hope it doesn't really affect him to the point where we don't see him in the cage anymore. Now, who's the fighter? On the tip of my tongue, someone had to retire due to health issues. Who was that?
You're thinking of Zabit Magomed.
My mind's drawing blank. That's the one, of course. Speaking of him, by the way, I completely forgot this. I was going to move into something else, but I don't know if you saw this. His brother competing in PFL/Bellator yesterday, and he basically just looks like him. So really, we haven't lost anything, because I'm sure that guy in the UFC looks like Zabit never left, and I'm excited for that. But what I was going to get into, as I mentioned earlier,
I've got the quote
UFC 30.
I've got the quote here.
You got the quote? Okay, go for it. Yeah.
The guy gets ill. There is something with his body that reacts to hard training because he is the hardest worker in the room. He very easily catches a cold. For example, a runny nose, coughing, symptoms that are not a big deal at all. We all get that. But I've seen when he increases his training a lot, I know his body reacts differently to the training. I don't know where it comes from. It's crazy how he reacts to training these days. So that pretty much says exactly what I just said. Which is not a bad shout from me at all, is it? It's just, I'm feeling pretty smug. I'm feeling pretty smug. I need a few seconds.
I'll give you that.
But the reason I say that is because I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it, what it looks like when people start ramping up their training and the intensity that gets to, and also what it can look like if you're overtraining. And what you get from that is like when you overtrain in anything, especially when your calories are lowering as well. If you were to just not be training that hard even in MMA and was to just do a basic sport and was training fairly hard and you were lowering your calories, there's a particular list of side effects which are prevalent always, especially when you're reducing your weight. So when you combine that with seriously hard training in MMA, it's not hard to predict that for some of these athletes, they will get these symptoms. It is very just standard. You even get in things like bodybuilding. You get these things. So, of course, it's going to happen in MMA where they train like crazy. The physical exertion is so high. So it wasn't a hard link, that one, I don't think, just to the overtraining. Because the reason I only say that is because everyone that speaks about him always says the same thing. So it's just pattern recognition, right? It's, okay, this is how this man trains and this is what he's known for. And this is what's happening to him. And this is when it's happening to him. And it's just, it sounds like to me that he just needs to maybe look at his training and just think, right, okay, maybe I'm training too hard. Maybe my skills are good and I just need to focus more on my skills and trust in that if I'm working hard on the air dime, if I'm getting my conditioning in, I'll be in good shape, you know, and not have to do as many.
It is interesting though, because you look at obviously the big critique of Chimaev in the cage. It seems to be his Achilles heel is his cardio, which is an interesting thing to say when obviously all this knowledge of him overtraining or being a killer in training. Yeah, perhaps. Why. I don't know.
Because what you hear a lot of fighters say, and what I think is one of the best examples of who does this to one of the highest levels is Sean O'Malley. And you hear Tim Welch talk about it. And they talk about them looking at Sean as a prize-winning racehorse. You don't go and sprint that horse every single day, just religiously. You don't go and sprint it, and then it gets to race day and it's just done 1,000 sprints throughout the summer. No, you have to sort of hold it back just a touch. when you have these high-level vehicles. You can't just redline them, because what may be happening is the reason why he's flagging a little bit and fatiguing a little bit in the fights. It could be a number of things, but it could be he's just given a lot to the training camps, given a lot to his training, given a lot to his wrestling rounds, his sparring rounds, just given a lot of energy, so that when it comes to fight night, he's had a million fights. So you can feel sometimes a little bit flat. And he's even done incredible things with that. So it could be a case of thinking, okay, let's imagine a world in where he comes in a lot more fresher, and maybe he can push that pace for 15 minutes, 25 minutes then. So it's a lot of ifs, buts and maybes, and there's a lot of nuances in this game. So it could be a number of things, you know.
Hopefully we see him soon. Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed, because no one wants to see something like that, really. But especially a man of his talent as well, and what he can do. What's that, sorry?
I'm just on one today. I don't know.
You're on a very good run. But yeah, as I was saying, UFC 305 has finally been announced. I feel like it's been in the works for a long time. Something we already knew was going to happen. The narrative makes sense. You've got that backstory, and you've got Adesanya, who's one of the biggest names in the sport, not just now but ever, one of the greatest middleweights of all time, against a man who somehow miraculously keeps seeming to win. I don't know how he does it, but he's made me a fan as a result. And they're finally competing against one another. And I feel like it's long overdue. Obviously, it was meant to happen, but due to injury, I think things fell through. But now we're getting it, hopefully. And I'm excited. And I remember a long time ago we spoke about this, way back when. But I think it was actually when Adesanya was still the champion, if I'm not mistaken. And it was when Robert Whittaker was just about to fight Dricus, and we were entertaining the possibility. We were entertaining that possibility of Dricus fighting Adesanya before he'd even fought Whittaker at the time. And I said, there's no way in hell he gets through Whittaker, blah, blah, blah. And you were generally agreeing, but you also touted that possibility that he could win. And then obviously he beat Whittaker. And at that point, I'd fully converted to the other side. And ever since then, I said back then, the seeds were planted in my head for that opinion to change. And now I'm fully on board. I think Dricus du Plessis dominates Israel Adesanya. I really do. I don't even care. I'm going to say it. I think he drowns him. I really do. I really think he does. I think he takes him down, and Izzy will get up and he'll get taken down again. And I think into that later rounds, you'll just see it more and more in Dricus' favour. And I see probably a late decision or maybe even a late stoppage just through exhaustion. Honestly, I think Dricus is really in his ascendancy. He might not look like it every time he fights, but he gets it done. He does get it done, and that's something that is in itself is an innate skill that a lot of people don't have. Just the ability to win out of nowhere. You know, he's one of those guys that can do that. What were your initial feelings on that matchup now compared to back then? Because I know things have definitely changed.
I think if anything, I've gone further against what I previously felt, and ever since I watched Dricus du Plessis just floating backwards and then just boom nuking that guy. Can't remember who it was at the time.
Trevin Giles.
Just floating back and boom, 1 foot on the ground. Just nuked him. I remember him just being well on my radar. And I just never went against him because I just watched him every time. It felt like he was fighting quite consistently. And every single time he just found a way to win. There's some people like that. I've watched some people like that. You know who the other one was like that?
Give me the division.
Brother. You would have never guessed.
Oh, Muhammad, yeah.
I watched him from his first fight in Tough, and I seemed to watch about 6 fights, and I couldn't believe that this man kept winning. And it just got to a point that I just had to keep saying he will prove me wrong every single time.
Well, he did lose, didn't he? Mick Parkin beat him. Big Mick Parkin.
Eventually he did, but he went on a flipping decent run.
He did.
He got a good few wins, way more than he should have done.
That Zach Poalga knockout when he won Tough.
Yeah, like, what the hell? Where the hell did that come from?
Freak power.
Alas. So, ever since then, I just had him on my radar. I've never gone against him, but the reason I'm going against him in this matchup is a difficult one because I do think he's at a point where, you know what I really like about Dricus? when he speaks, he does speak with conviction, and he is very confident. And you get all of the sense that he believes in what he's telling you. And he has a lot of empirical evidence to suggest him saying these things as well. He has trained with a lot of high-level guys. He has been to the top of the mountain now. He has... We kind of forget what he'd done outside of the UFC. You know, this guy has a very, very impressive record coming into it. But just because of his style, just because it's a little bit clumpy, quite easy to overlook.
I don't know how he does it.
It's quite easy to overlook. But what I'm realizing every year that I watch MMA is everyone in their head has this idea of what MMA should look like. But it's wrong, because there is no way for it to look, as long as it can be effective. And that's one thing that Dricus always is effective. And the thing that he does offer that a lot of Israel's opponents haven't been able to offer is genuine fight-altering damage on the ground. And a lot of the people Izzy has fought, maybe there's been a grappling threat, but rarely they've had a very dominating ground game where there's going to be heavy elbows, heavy punches, heavy body work, and heavy submission offense as well. Because he does look for those chokes. He does look for Darcy's we've seen before, you know, against Robert Whittaker. Wasn't a million miles away. And he's confident there. And we've seen him as well. We've seen him in these grappling quintets where he just went out and
about to bring that up.
A full team.
1v5.
Just went out 1v5 and just smoked a full team. And a week before, he was just boozing. This was just an impromptu tournament that they went and done.
Gracie Barra as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Like legit Gracie black belts. Gracie Barra black belts, not
this
Gracie
is
family.
A guy that will happily lean on his wrestling. And very rarely you have someone that is willing to do both with Izzy. And even some people that can grapple, they typically always get into the striking because he's very hard to mix it up with Izzy because he's so hard to get in on. It's one thing saying to take him down, but it's another thing doing it when he's moving laterally and he's kicking out of both stances and showing knees and uppercuts. It becomes very, very dangerous. And you go back throughout his career and he's got a lot of finishes like that. I'm thinking of people like Derek Brunson even on the Izzy career. And it could look a lot like that. And I'm glad that I stumbled across that because that was a fight I was thinking this could look something like. Because although I think Dricus has all the skills to beat Izzy, I also think he's going to give opportunities like a Derek Brunson. So whilst he is dangerous...
That's true.
You have to be on your P's and Q's with Izzy. And I just think that, yes, he didn't have a good fight against Sean. And I understand that. And he's not been winning a lot of fights. But the one thing I can guarantee, I can guarantee you something. His pinpoint kickboxing has gone nowhere. Nowhere. It's gone nowhere. And I very much believe we're going to see the highest level of that. I think his mind's in a good spot. It sounds like he's actually gone away and made interesting adjustments to his camps, because people at that level that have done what he's done do not go back really and go and look at their S&C at that point, really go and look at their diet, their nutrition and things like that. Not always.
They got it on lock.
They usually have that on lock, but he's gone back and looked at that and said, you know what, there's areas for improvement. And I'm thinking, what you're telling me that he's all of a sudden he's a world beater and then what? He can't, no. I think he's going to be on form, and I think that's going to be a problem. That's the only reason that I'm going against Dricus, is because I'm just betting on a 100% Izzy, and I think he still beats anyone in the middleweight division, including Rob, if he's 100% on full capability. That's what I think.
I agree with most of that sentiment. I actually think he'll be on form. I think he'll be in his best shape as he can be. I think his camp will go good. Again, these are all just predictions here. And I do think he will be on that. And it's an interesting thing you bringing up the Brunson fight, because I definitely see the similarities. But I think something Dricus is so good at that maybe Brunson is, even though they're very on the feet, they're very good at that bull rushing style. I think Dricus is much better at sort of closing that gap a lot quicker and finding those shots, because he always leads in with that first shot. He reaches and he lands that first shot, and then comes that sort of bull rush flurry. And I guess I'm comparing it to the way Sean uses his jab as an entry and a defensive tool, might I say. But you have to keep Izzy occupied with your offense. I think that's the reality of getting a win against a guy who's so good and measured in his kickboxing. You have to use your offense to take away his. It's a rock versus rock situation, I guess. And I think that's what Drickers is going to do. And then that would probably open up some grappling opportunities. And as you said, as we just discussed, his grappling ability with the quintet, as it's shown, very dangerous with his chokes. I honestly, it is tough because Izzy will definitely be on his A game. He pretty much never isn't. He's one of the best in the world in preparation. I'm not going to sit here and say it's not going to be a tough fight because against Adesanya, you're going to have a difficult time. It's a difficult puzzle to solve that not many have and can. But I think Drickers can do it. And Izzy has an opportunity to become a 3-time champion. And there's been debates about that recently. I don't know if anyone's actually done that before. I heard some people saying it wasn't I'm losing my words here. It wasn't an admirable achievement, which I disagree because I think winning the belt is one thing.
People are stupid.
Doing it again, doing it again is very
stupid.
difficult because you've got to climb that mountain. Yeah,
I
know it makes no sense. And doing it a third time, the motivation is one thing. That's the mental side of the thing. That's half the battle. Being able to climb that mountain over and over, even after you've lost, especially in such a dominating fashion, the way Strickland did it to him. And Pereira, of course, the first time round. And to come back from those, obviously after the Pereira one, he did so successfully, and it remains to be seen whether he can against Dricus. But being able to win a belt again is such a hard thing, and it's a reason not many people have done it. Most champions, after they lose, they tend to go on a downfall or a decline that's pretty unforgiving, right? Most fighters do.
Right.
Not many tend to do the opposite, and Izzy has the opportunity to do it a third time, which, if I'm not mistaken, as I said, I don't think anyone's done before. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've had a 3-time champion in the UFC, at least in one weight class. Have we?
But that's what he said on that post-fight press conference. The one in the octagon when he said, I get to do this over and over and over again. It's like, yeah, people online saying, oh, that's not admirable. What? Let's not even entertain.
You winning a UFC belt. What about that's not admirable?
Let's not entertain that. That's just comical at that point, because any logical human being that puts themselves in that position, they get knocked down whilst they're at the peak of their powers. You get all of this discourse online around the world on millions of your followings about how you aren't the person you once were and how you'll never be the same. And you get to go and prove it wrong. And then you have another setback. And it's cliche, but it's part of the story. It's part of the story. The reason why Michael Bisping's story is so fantastic is not because, he went out and just flushed every single fight and won the belt. It's because of the trials and tribulations. And the exact same thing happens when someone loses the belt and then regains it. Because like you said, it requires a level of excellence to be a champion. That's so hard to attain. And once you've done that once, and once you've put so much energy into that, it's very hard to then re-push, like you said. And all the mental energy, all the physical energy that goes into that role and responsibility. And to do it 3 times is very, very impressive. Very impressive. And of course, we're not going to entertain comments like that because it's just silly. But when we actually sit here and think about when you sit here and think about what an incredible achievement that is within sport, within business, within just life, reaching the peak 3 times again is very, very hard to do. So it's very impressive. And
just to put that into perspective, by the way, Max Holloway is not a 2-time champion, and he hasn't won the belt back since losing it, despite how good he is, and still continues to prove to be. He still hasn't done it. So not many people have, and only the best
Max,
do.
Though,
so,
by the way, is Max not? Max has got to be. Listen, we've got to put him
I mean, we spoke earlier.
I'll
compare that to what we said about
5.
Poirier and about Whittaker. Resume, amount of different fighters. It's why I don't give as much credit to guys like. No disrespect, but I don't value people. This is a bit of a hot take.
I know you're going to say Khabib. You're going to say Khabib.
No. But guys like Kamaru Usman, and this is no disrespect to him because he had a great title reign, 4 or 5 title defenses. I always get it wrong, but a lot of them. No. Hear me out here. 4 of those title defenses. 4 of those title defenses were against only two different guys. 2 of them were Masvidal twice, Covington twice. I value fighting multiple different fighters in a reign. I think you have to. I think that makes sense. I don't think you can critique that. I think facing multiple different unique challenges as opposed to the same person multiple times is more impressive. Hence why I value a guy like Max Holloway more than I do Kamaru Usman, even if he's had less title defenses, because the amount of different challenges Holloway's faced and overcame. So that's why I always say I think Usman's title reign a little bit overrated. And I still respect the hell out of him. I still think he's one of the best welterweights of all time. But do I think his title reign's a bit overrated? Yeah, I do. And I think there's other instances you could say that as well. But there's the hot take. I don't even think it's that hot. I think it's lukewarm at best.
No, that's fair. Yeah, you had some things to get off your chest today. It's apparent.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'll calm down now. I promise.
No. I like it. I'm ready for it. I'm enjoying it. I think it's. I see what you're saying. You're saying the different styles over different people. Yeah, I don't know in truth how I feel about that. I can't even give you a succinct answer how I feel about that, because I definitely think either presents different. It definitely presents different difficulties, because you think of the rematch.
That's true.
I think the rematch, I would argue I would rather fight two high level. But me personally, I'd rather fight two different high level guys that were not named Colby Covington for the same fight check, for thinking about that man for probably the better part of 36 months. Psychologically, that's a big impact.
I understand that.
That's very, very tricky. A lot was gone into that. A lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of attention. That's a lot of on the brain and the shoulders for a very, very long time. That's his own certain weight. I have to factor that in when I look at those rematches. I honestly do, because I think that's a lot. And what you have to remember as well is this will be quickly forgotten. And I don't necessarily think I was one of these people that subscribed to this, but a lot of people had Colby Covington in their pound-for-pound rankings, by the way. A lot of people thought that he was going to beat Kamaru Usman. A lot of people entertained that he was the best welterweight in the world. A lot of people said that.
I thought he won the second
fight.
fight.
And a lot of people, here we go, right?
I thought he won 3 rounds. I do.
This is my point. So when you look at that rematch, as well as that, this wasn't just our contender. Oh, it's Colby. Oh yeah, then Leon beat him. No. This was someone that everyone was saying, no, this is the guy. Everyone was like, okay, yeah. That's why they were so enticing, because it kind of was like, okay, maybe he is. Maybe he actually is. So I think those rematches were big. But we're going on a big side tangent. Let's get on track.
Yeah. I mean, there was another thing I was going to say, but we can bid that off. I was, obviously, we mentioned before we just jumped on the recording, obviously some creative stuff. I've had some really cool stuff in the pipeline, but first, I want to hear what you've been doing. The last of your Thailand expeditions, as the phrase I've used before. What's been going on? What's the lowdown?
I forget what I've told you and what I haven't. Okay, so it will be last couple of weeks in Thailand. So I'm currently working on to finish off my casuals comic with AK Thailand and send that over to them with their big opening. And then I'm already in the process of working on the casuals comic for UFC Manchester, and also be working on the clothing to go with that. And I'll be giving that away in UFC Manchester. So I'll be giving away some of the t-shirts and some of the comics together. So working on that also this week. Working on just getting a couple of more finalized versions of these jerseys. Been very, very arduous, going back and forth with different suppliers, trying to do it in time and trying to get the right product.
I was going to ask you about this, actually.
Not easy. And I know that you have been toggling with a similar idea. So yeah, we can get into that. And also been finalizing my trip to Japan, where I will be going at the start of July, which is actually an opportunity I'm very, very excited for, to be honest. Very excited for.
I tell you, fill me in on that. That's what I want to know about, because this isn't actually you haven't spoken about this on the pod, actually, have you? This is very new. So why don't you let the listeners know the lowdown of that? Going to Japan, which you haven't been before. We spoke about this even a couple of weeks ago before this even came to fruition, right? About
What did we say?
I believe we spoke about it on the pod about Japan just being a really nice place. I loved it when I went. And obviously that was for recreational purposes. This is more for business. But, I mean, doesn't mean you can't sample a bit of the culture while you're there. It's a great place.
No, that's exactly what
that's the whole part of it.
The job is. That's exactly what the point of it is. And it was a couple of days before I got these opportunities that I was saying to my cousin and his wife. They were talking about Japan because it's very close to Bangkok. And they were saying, why don't I go? I said, I don't want to go unless it's for work purposes. They sort of looked at me like, but it's pretty close. I was like, I don't want to go unless it's for work purposes. And then the next 2 days, basically, I got an invitation to go to Tokyo top team and to go and meet with the coach and Kai Asakura, the new signing from Risen, and one of the UFC's biggest ever signings.
I mean, we were speaking about him the other week.
Yeah, we were.
Crazy how the pieces fall into place, right?
And then I got a call the same week, and hopefully this comes into fruition. But I also got a call. I was on a work call the next couple of days, and I mentioned, because they said, what were my plans? And I mentioned that was my plans before I went home. And they said, this particular company has an athlete there, and they would like for me to go and meet up with the athlete and shoot some content with them. And then they would bring a videographer out there and we could do some work around Japan. So that would be pretty cool as well. So hopefully...
You're not allowed to say who. That's stay under wraps.
I won't say yeah. I'll hope just in case it doesn't come to fruition. But hopefully it will do it.
Oh, you can tell me off it.
Otherwise it will just be a bit of a disappointment. But yeah, hopefully there'll be two opportunities in a couple of weeks there. So yeah, that'd be cool. And that is something that that's been a forever bucket list, to be perfectly honest, to work.
So you're just going to Tokyo, or?
Hopefully it will be Tokyo and somewhere else, but I won't say where because it might give it away. So
okay.
Tokyo and somewhere else.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully that comes into fruition. So yeah, I'll be doing that at the start of July, and then I'll be coming home for UFC Manchester, and also the Cage Warriors the week before will be in London. So I'll be working that event as well. And that'll be a big event because there's a prize tournament of 50,000, I think, for the bantamweights. So it's quite a big tournament as well. So yeah, busy couple of weeks coming up.
That's putting it lightly, mate.
Yeah, intense.
Perfect timing though for you as well, because it saves you the long trip. Going to Japan from the UK, it's about 13 and a half hours, if I'm not mistaken. Long time, so it's nice. You can sort of check that off, and then are you flying straight back home from Japan? I'll
be going to Japan, and then on the way back, I'll be flying into Vietnam, and I've got a couple of things that I want to do in Vietnam. There's one gym that I want to film at, but there's also I want to go and get a very particular type of coffee because I have a machine at home now, and I want to create the perfect Vietnamese iced coffee at home, salted Vietnamese coffee every day, and I want to go and curate my own bean.
Nice.
Vietnam.
Speaking of coffee, I saw you critiquing my coffee of choice. Thank you very much.
Brother.
What was that about? Yeah, listen.
Come on.
For those who don't know, I posted a picture of my iced coffee on Instagram.
Never that guy.
And I was bullied. I was bullied. I'll say it. I was bullied.
You know what? It's such low hanging fruit, and it's so played out that I would never even go on someone's video or photo and say, can I have some sugar with that milk or something? But I just saw that, and it just, I don't know. It just
no sugar. I will say though, I know, and there was no sugar.
It was completely white. It was essentially.
I think the lighting didn't help, but let a man like his iced latte. All right, that's my drink of choice. I will tell you, you would like it. I don't know, but it was fucking good.
Did it have like a strong coffee taste? I like it when they have a strong coffee
Yeah,
taste.
yeah. No, it was punchy. It was punchy.
Oh, was it?
It
Okay,
wasn't
fair.
like obviously like a proper like an Americano or anything like that, or just straight black, straight black coffee. But it was nice. It had a nice kick to
I
it.
like it when they're a bit aggressive, you know.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah. On the creative side of things, on mine though, as I said, I didn't mention this on the pod, but I've spoken this about on stream a few times over the last week. Had a bit of a creative brainwave the other week. I've spoken about this to you already a little bit, but finally looking at designing some clothing ideas, and my real main focus, because this is something I've always really wanted to do and at least give it a proper crack, was I really wanted to, I don't want to say go artwork first, but I wanted to use the clothing as a means to show off art. I think there's a balance there between making a piece of clothing that looks nice to wear and also having something worthwhile. Yeah, see, that's where I need to get to, because I've got the idea, I've got the vision, I know exactly what I want. It's finding the right person to bring it to life, because I can't draw anything more than a stick man, and that's at a push. Even they don't look good. So I'm trying to find the right person to do it with. And when I've been looking at a lot of just freelance artists. Yeah, I've done all the drafting. I've got a big mood board. I know exactly what I want, and I can't give too much away. I'll show it to you in a little bit when we're not on
What do you mean you can't
the
give
pod.
too much
But
away? Come on. You
I can't give away the
build this up like
design.
that and give some design. Come on.
I can't give this. Well, there'll be a lot of color. I'll say that. It'll be nice.
I'll let you know what will be on the t-shirts that will come with the comics if you also let us know what the design will be.
I can't. It's not there yet. I literally can't. I'm very protective over my. Not that I think someone's going to steal it or anything. I'm not like that. But it's more of a case of. I don't know. I'm passionate about it. It's a personal. I wouldn't say it's like relative, like related to me particularly, but I'm just very passionate about my own ideas. You know what
let's hear it.
No. Listen, it'll be sick when it's done. You'll see it. Everyone will see it when it's done properly and it's come to life. You'll know how sick it is.
What's the timeline on it? Honestly, just.
I don't know. See, I haven't got a timeline on it right now. I'm probably. It's a case of getting the design done.
Doesn't matter what it is, but just put one on it so you have some accountability.
Let's say we'll get it out by the end of the year. I don't know, because at the moment it's a bit of a side thing, and I kind of want to get more designs done.
Yeah.
So I want to have maybe at least 2 or 3, because at the moment I've just got the one.
End of the year.
But let's say by the end of the year. But the problem is, really it comes down to is, let's just say hypothetically it's just this design. It's a case of getting the design brought to life by an artist who I like and can really have a proper bit of communication with. So I'm really back and forth with them. There's no just you do this and then they go off and draw it, and I'm not happy with it. I want constant communication. I want to have that, build a reputation, and then it's a matter of a little bit, yeah. It sucks as well. I mean, I wish I was a good artist, so I wouldn't have to deal with this sort of thing. But I know I'm very particular about what I want. But then it's just a case of bringing it through, as you said, or a distributor, someone who could actually manufacture the clothing. Because obviously, I don't think I'm going to do it myself. And that was what I was going to ask you about: is what's your experience been like with that, and what's the process of doing so?
It's tedious, to be perfectly honest. It's really tedious. You have multiple options. You can. It depends how you want to go about it. Do you want to get the garment and then get it yourself and then print it, or then give it to someone else for them to screen print, or for them to DTF print, direct to fabric? So that's like a printing technique.
Yeah.
It depends what you want. And then it depends what country do you want to go to, is probably dependent on what materials you're looking for and what sort of garments you're looking at getting. And then you have to looking at samples. So then you have to go back and forth with your designs and make sure that you have the necessary packs to give to the manufacturers so that they know what you're asking for. Be very detailed, be very specific, very meticulous, and you go back and forth a million times, and then you'll have to buy multiple samples, and then you'll have to also buy multiple import costs on the samples, and it will become quite expensive.
How expensive?
Well, it depends. It
How
depends
much are we
what your
talking?
minimum order quantity is. So if you're dealing with bigger suppliers, then they're going to have bigger minimum
That's
order
true.
quantity, so MOQs. So is it 25 or is it 50? Or maybe is it 100? It depends what you're looking at. It depends what garment you're looking at. It depends what type, what fabric. Then it's like, what GSM do you want? Grams per square meter. Do you want something heavier, like a 300? Do you want something lighter, like a 200, 100? Also bearing in mind that depending on what garment it is, depends on what the shipping cost is going to be. So the heavier garments are going to be heavier shipping costs as well. So that's higher. So it's just no. There's a lot of.
Oh boy, not looking forward to that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to know, right? And this is when you start anything, you have to be in the trenches of these things, knowing these things, because if you are to inevitably scale it, it is always better to know these different elements of processes. So it depends how you want to go about it. Yeah, do you want to get the garment just from source and then print it on your end? Do you want to do the printing yourself? Do you want to screen print yourself? Do you want to get a printer and print it yourself? Do you want to give it to another manufacturer who just does printing or embroidery or whatever it may be? Or do you want to get it done in that particular country? So then you have all different types of options, really.
That's a mouthful, isn't it? Fucking hell.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Oh, God. I'm not looking forward to that.
I wasn't trying to
I will say, for this is when it's...
I was trying to provide value, so I don't know if...
Yeah, of course, of course.
Spitball.
I mean, it's definitely going to be a minefield. I'm going to have to
different things
navigate.
And dependent on what sort of quantity, if it's lesser quantity, you're probably going to want something like AliExpress, which is lower quantities than Alibaba, for example, which is going to be higher MOQs, but it's probably going to have less variety and less choice. And then, of course, being in England, the lead times are going to be quite heavy, so everything's going to be sort of a 1-4-2 and things like that. So just factoring these things in from early. And also, there's hacks, like you can go and get t-shirts that you like the fabric of, and you can send them to these factories, or you can just get it sent from the place to the factory and say, okay, like this, I want this, and just match it up to the factory and knowing what they're good at, what fabrics they use, and is it a similar fabric, and matching that to what the manufacturers are good at with the fabrics they use, and then you can sort of reverse engineer it. So there are hacks, there are ways around it.
I'm sure I'll figure it out. Yeah, that's a lot to do, but that is the game we play, is it not? That's all part of the fun, I suppose it is.
Question, because if anyone's listening, that was of value to. But maybe there are people that are listening, because I think a lot of people have that sort of idea, right? There's a lot of people. But
100%. I mean, I've had it for a long time. I've always had a small part of me that's wanted to do something like this. So,
what I've realized for me personally is what the difficult thing is with a lot of people, Leo, that are trying to build clothing brands. It's very hard to do from scratch, very hard to do, right? Because everything about clothing is subconscious messaging of some sort of level in society. Everything that clothing does. So it's very hard to establish that to some people's subconscious when something is less known. So anything that's been around for longer is going to have more notoriety and more subconscious meaning. That's why the bigger brands are going to have these bigger societal meanings. So it's very hard to build from scratch. What I'm trying to do is build a brand with clothing. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a brand with clothing. I'm not trying to build a clothing brand.
Very good. Yeah, I don't know if I'm on the same route there.
But
I almost don't want to. No, of course not. See, my mindset with it was, and I think I'll wrap up on this. Is it was a case of I wanted to build something. Let's say in the far future, I've got this all established, loads of designs, collections, etc., etc. I want that to be its own thing. I want it to be tied into MMA in some capacity, but I don't want it to be really related to my channel in any ways. You know, obviously, I want to just be related to the sport, but obviously you have to have that connection with the channel. So I'd use the channel to leverage it. So I leverage. Sorry, the other way around. I leverage my audience, to push that brand and push that product. So I want it as its own thing, but rather than in your case, obviously tying the two things directly together.
No, of course. I think maybe there was a misunderstanding because I agree with you 100%. I think you use it initially to leverage. That was my point. So you marry them together. Okay. Initially use it to leverage. But if you ever want to have success in anything, it's always going to grow beyond the brand naturally. It would be stupid to imagine that a brand over 10 years is just going to come from one core thing. It's going to have a network effect, I would imagine. So I 100% agree with you. But yeah, it's a good place to wrap up with some good value to end on, I think.
Indeed. This has been the MMA Creators Podcast. I believe we're on episode number 56. 56, I believe. If not, it's 57. Either way, we will see you again, same time next Sunday. Cheers. Bye.